position for McLaren and Porsche, but there's still plenty of rounds to go, and the battle on honours is wide open. Very first round at Silverstone back in April, Julian gave our Lister a throttle at the start and put it in the wall. In round 2 at Alton, we managed to salvage third spot, but then mechanical failure put us out at Croft. So, when we lined up on pole position for round 4 at Snetterton, we were desperate for success. John Greasley was alongside in the Porsche he shares with Marcus Wallander, while Jake Ulrich lined up in third spot in the number 2 Lister, sharing the second row with the McLaren F1 of Pink Floyd manager Steve O'Rourke. This time I was doing the starting duties, and although I managed to keep in a straight line, I got outgunned into the first corner by the Porsche. But then I outbraked it into the second and headed down the straight in the lead, chased by the Porsche, the McLaren, the TVR Speed 12 and the GT2 pace-setting Chrysler Viper. Jake had already been muscled back to 8th and then did a Bailey at the S's. With most of the quicker drivers doing the second stint, it was my job to give Julian as big a lead as I could from the chasing pack, while Jake's job was just to get back on the track. Through Richards in 4th gear, with a touch of oversteer. Then, down to second for Sear. Bit by bit, the gap to the Porsche was growing, and we were both dropping O'Rourke. Oh, the joys of leading. But then there are back markers and rain showers to contend with. By now, Paul Evans in the 3rd Lister has moved up from the back of the grid to take 4th from the TBR, which soon becomes 3rd when O'Rourke locks up and wisely elects to take to the escape road. While I managed to avoid such embarrassing moments, the pit lane is about to become a very busy place as the driver changes begin 15 minutes into the 50-minute race. First it's Greasley in for Wallander, then Jake in for his fast man Ian Flux. Wallander is soon on his way, while Jake still can't believe he's spun. O'Rourke is in to hand over to Tim Sugden. Flux is soon on his way, while Wallander is already on a charge. I'm in next, my job done for the day, and Julian soon has the Lister in 1st gear and back on the track. Now in 2nd place behind the Evans Lister, but has yet to stop, but just ahead of the 3rd place TVR. Steady now, Jules. It's slippery out there. As first, Ian Flux. And then Tim Sugden graphically demonstrated. The spin by Tim putting the McLaren a full lap down on our Lister. It must have seemed a long way from 4th place at Le Mans the week before. With Flux heading for retirement, our main opposition remained the Wallander-Greasley Porsche, but then down into those slippery S's, that was taken out for us by the errant Quaife GT1, driven on a suicide run down the inside by Paul Lee. There was never going to be a gap there, and for the stranded Porsche crew, so the Newcastle United Lister Storm, driven by Tiff Needell and Julian Bailey, had a gentle cruise to the checkered flag and victory. Ah, there's no smile bigger than a winning smile. Round 5 was at Silverstone, supporting the British Grand Prix, and I was back on board for the opening stint, but this time I had the back of the blue Coral Porsche filling my view. With the track still wet in parts and no intermediates as an option, I played safe and chose wets, while the chasing pack went for anything from wets to intermediates or even slicks. Initially, it seemed a good choice, and I began to hassle John for the lead. while poor Jake ended another promising start on the grass. At the beginning of the third lap, my pressure finally paid off. John slid wide at Copse, hung on to a big moment, but quickly lost 4 places. Unfortunately, Peter Hardman in a second GTC McLaren making its series debut at Silverstone had already sailed past the pair of us a lap earlier, running intermediate rubber, and I now had Paul Evans in the Hewland Lister and Jamie Campbell-Walter in the neat little Harrier Ford homing in on me fast. 1 lap later, and I was forced to concede second to Evans, confident that on equal rubber, Julian would be more than a match for the co-drivers of the 2 cars now ahead of me. My main concern was just to maintain a lead over Greasley's Porsche. By lap 6, Hardman and Evans were maintaining their positions in front of me, but now there was a new threat lurking in my mirrors. The Croft-winning Porsche 911 GT1, driven for the first time by touring car man Max Neal, and he had started on slicks. Past the pits and into Copse, and I was easy prey on the now dry track. With driver changes not allowed for the first 15 minutes, I had to stay out for a few laps longer, while Julian patiently waited his turn. Greasley was in right on the quarter-hour mark to hand over to his Swedish hot shoe, who dutifully obeyed the 60km/h pit lane speed limit. While back on the track, Max Neal was having the time of his life and took the lead off Hardman at the Abbey chicane. Fortunately, my struggle for survival is finally over, and I can't wait to bail out and hand over to Julian as the Lister crew swiftly replace the worn wets with slicks. Hardman is determined to stay out for as long as he can on his intermediates before handing over to his less experienced co-driver Gregor Fiskin. But Bobby Verdon-Rose started the TVR Speed 12 on slicks, and he's soon through to second as Julian picks up the pace behind and waits for the race order to settle. Sugden has now taken over from O'Rourke in the Emka McLaren, but for the second race running finds the onboard camera an embarrassing passenger. But again, he lives to fight another lap. Evans is next to stop to hand over to his team boss, William Hewland, but the wheel change doesn't go smoothly and vital seconds are lost. They would end the race in 5th spot behind Sugden and O'Rourke. Neal was next into the pit lane at half distance to hand over to fellow touring car star David Leslie, which handed a moment of glory at the head of the field to the TVR Speed 12 in its debut season. But when the TVR finally pitted for its compulsory stop, we were the ones out in front, despite the damp conditions making driving tricky, as Alex Portsman discovered when his Harrier hit oil just as Julian was lapping him. But Julian wasn't finding it all plain sailing up front, as the slower cars weren't always easy to find a way past, and the gap back to Wallander was gradually ebbing away. That's us. And that's the opposition. We got out ahead of them at about 20-second lead, but Wallander is whittling the lead down. We've got about 6 laps to go. I think our lead is about 6 seconds. Wallander, they've got ABS on the Porsche, which for overtaking all the slower cars in these damp conditions can help. And I can't talk anymore because it's too nerve-wracking. With just 4 laps to go, Wallander was on Julian's tail just as he came upon the wandering amateur Gerard McQuillan. Both leaders went to the left, and so did Gerald. But 1 lap later, as they crossed the line for the 22nd time, it was Wallander's turn to be forced to lift off, and Julian pounced. pit's wall, we couldn't be sure if he'd made it through or not, but he had. And a lap and a half later, as he headed towards the end of the 24th lap, it looked like Wallander was a beaten man. But the red flags flew before the lap was over, as Kilian Koenig had changed up from third to second, locked the rear wheels, and planted his Viper into the pit straight barriers. As Julian cruised through the wreckage, we gave him a winner's reception, but we'd forgotten the red flag ruling that takes the result back to the last full lap completed by the whole field, lap 22, which was led by the Porsche. Oh, cruel world.